The Supreme Court of Appeal has ordered Eskom to immediately restore full maximum electricity supply to residents of Ngwathe municipality in the Free State and the Lekwa municipality in Mpumalanga. And handing down its ruling in favour of the two community associations, the SCA reversed Eskom's decision that was implemented in February 2020 when Eskom decided to reduce the bulk electricity supply to these municipalities. Now, Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha joins us now virtually to discuss this matter further. Sikonathi, good to see you again. Welcome to Morning Live. Let's start with Eskom's reaction to the judgment.
Eskom will, now that there is the judgment on the matter, will of course concentrate on Part B, the main case of the application, in which Eskom indeed seeks to get the municipality to honour their debts and indeed to manage their electricity supply in a manner that is sustainable, not only for Eskom, but both to the municipalities and to their own customers. So we await judgment, or we await the hearings to proceed on that case, and indeed we will comply with this outcome as it stands.
So just in getting to how we arrived at the situation, the SCA said, of course, in that judgment that Eskom was not constitutionally and statutorily permitted to unilaterally reduce the bulk electricity supply to those municipalities, the two in question, Ngwathe and Lekwa. Now, what is constitutional and statutory as far as Eskom is concerned in such cases?
The court also did say, Sakina, that Eskom must first exhaust all the internal government programs, that is, with regards to the Intergovernmental Regulatory Framework Act. So Eskom must exhaust all measures possible to resolve matters amongst state institutions, in this case, these municipalities and Eskom, and must use the government through the National Department of Cooperative Governance. So we will indeed explore those. But now that we do have this judgment on the case, we can concentrate on the main case, which seeks to compel the municipalities to honor their own obligations to their own residents, indeed, and to their supplier, which is Eskom. The court also did find that liable, and there is no dispute that there is the Eskom is owed an amount of 2.3 billion rand together by the municipalities, and the court did also find that the municipalities are in breach of their agreement with Eskom in not paying for the services while they collect the revenues from their own customers. The court did also find that the municipalities are delinquent and are dysfunctional at best and need to be assisted through the Governmental Interrelations Framework Act.
So, to that point, Sikonathi, as you point out correctly, what the court had also cited in terms of the failures on the part of the municipalities, but coming back to Eskom, and you make the point as well, you touched on it, with regard to dispute resolution remedies that are available to Eskom in order to tackle these municipalities when they don't pay. And basically the court saying that Eskom did not follow some of those resolutions. So what are the dispute resolution mechanisms available at Eskom's disposal, I should say, when municipalities in fact don't pay?
These now remedies that are indeed proposed by the court indeed put further spikes on the road to getting municipalities to honor their debts. Eskom must now go through the state, particularly through the Department of Corporational Governance and Traditional Affairs, which governs municipalities, and seek and through the National Treasury, and seek remedies there whereby it can get the National Treasury, these respective departments, and Mineral Resources and Energy to compel the municipalities and indeed to assist the municipalities to bring their administrations in order so that they may be able to honor their debts and their obligations to both their suppliers and to the citizens. So this is a long process that Eskom now has to implement. Of course, this judgment is similar to one last year in which Eskom again was sent back to work through this framework act to resolve disputes among state institutions.
Sikonathi, whenever we talk about Eskom and Eskom debt, it always triggers a discussion about Soweto and what is going on there. So what is the current scenario with regard to Soweto and its debt?
Let's start here, Sakina. Total outstanding debt, including that owed by these two municipalities, Lekwa and the Ngwathe municipality, and many others, is now in excess of 43 billion rand. Let's repeat that. That's 43 billion rand that is owed by municipalities which have failed to pay for electricity they consume and that Eskom has supplied. So that is why Eskom has had to take these measures. In addition to that, we have about 12 billion rand owed by the residents of Soweto, those who are supplied directly by Eskom. And so the situation again there is that Eskom is doing what it can to recoup any of the funds from the residents, starting by dismantling illegal connections where possible, and indeed working with the communities and with the leadership of those communities to install new split meters in order to convert the users of electricity in those parts to prepaid rather than postpaid now. So it's again a very slow process in that you have to go house to house to check who has breached their meter, those that do have new meters, and indeed to install new electricity meters. Households that really for decades, for the better part of 40 years, have not been paying for electricity. We have to do this, and naturally, of course, our colleagues are not welcome with open arms by residents who have been enjoying free electricity at the expense of the rest of the public. So it's a very slow process, but that is what is available to us at this point.
But does Eskom honestly believe that simply switching the system from a postpaid to prepaid is going to solve the problem? Isn't that problem more nuanced, Sikonathi? How sure are you that the same problems that got you to this point as Eskom with the debt levels won't recur?
It's not just one solution, and it's not just a one size fits all, but every effort goes some way towards helping. So you will get some indeed to pay up and to honor their obligations to Eskom and to the country. We have had this in the past, but of course, in a country where there is not too much respect for the law in South Africa, you have people that have indeed been converted to prepaid meters, but have found a way around those meters and breached them, which is illegal. And that's where you find Eskom issuing temper fines of about 6,400 rands per household when you have found to have breached your electricity meter. So it's not just one solution, convert everybody to prepaid, but you continuously have to work with the communities, you have to work with the government, you have to work with the law enforcement agencies to the extent that you get any cooperation, and make sure that you hold those accountable for breaking the law and indeed for tampering with the electricity infrastructure. So it's a long process, and of course, let's repeat, the culture here is that people have not been paying for electricity for decades, and to get them to pay, you are not going to be met with any smiles.
So let me just understand this, Sikonathi. So once you issue that fine of 6,400 rand for tampering with the meter box, does that then leave you with a clean slate as an offender? Does that mean whatever happened before that is then scrapped off?
Once you settle that fine of 6,000 or acknowledge and enter into a repayment plan, which can be installments of 6 months, about 1,000 rand a month, you then get restored, and you get restored with a new meter and a smart meter that will enable you to be able to consume and buy electricity legally. That is the process.
So just rounding up Soweto, so Eskom has written off, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you've written off about 5 billion rand of Soweto's debt. So under what circumstances does the entity write off debt?
In the law, and particularly in the Public Finance Management Act, you cannot keep booking revenue in your books as if that is money you are able to collect. There is a point where debt has to lapse, and you cannot be charging interest on interest, which actually exacerbates the situation and makes it impossible for the entity that owes you money to be able to pay. So by law, every 3 years that you have not been able to collect the revenue, you have to check realistically how possible it is to be able to get in the revenue. So you cannot keep accounting for monies pretending that you can collect the money when you really cannot. And we do know, Sakina, the history before is that you really, even when Eskom did try in the past to get tough with customers to collect money, there have been some interventions that have been made, not only at government level, but indeed by the communities themselves. You have seen parts of Soweto going up in flames, when and particularly municipal councillors falling victim to the residents of the area for allowing Eskom to try and enforce the law.
And to your earlier point, Sikonathi, is it accurate that Paris, that's in the Ngwathe municipality, that they are experiencing load shedding for more than 11 hours a day in certain instances? It just, looking at that, looking at the fact that you have residents who are paying, there are, of course, issues of unserviced debt in certain instances, and, of course, from the municipality to Eskom. But if you look at that, 11 hours without electricity on any given day, surely that's going to cripple every economic activity in that town.
Sakina, we need to make this distinction. And of course, the customer sitting without electricity does not care whether you call it load shedding or it is load reduction, and does not care what the cause is. The only thing that matters to them at that point is that they do not have electricity supply. Load shedding is when Eskom implements patterns across the country when it is not able to supply electricity. Across the country, everybody gets affected for about 2 hours at a time. Now, load reduction is when Eskom itself implements cuts in localized areas where you have problems of infrastructure and illegal connections, which have destroyed transformers and left communities without electricity for weeks on end. So Eskom would be implementing load reduction in those areas. And in Ngwathe and indeed many other areas, you have implemented load reduction at the same time as load shedding was being implemented, which then coincided and in some instances led to people sitting without electricity for many hours. 11 hours, certainly there is a fault there that is none of those two, where people have to call Eskom or their supplier to fix whatever fault there would be, to repair it and to restore electricity. The reality is only for about 2 hours at a day will you be affected during load shedding, and load reduction happens between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. That's, again, the latter, the load reduction, to protect the equipment and to make sure that people do not stay for weeks on end when transformers have exploded due to electrical connections.
Interesting there. Sikonathi, I have to ask you about the 20.5% that you've applied for to NERSA, rise in electricity tariff there, which, of course, as you can imagine, has the public up in arms. And what are the hearings supposed to accomplish at this stage? Because 20.5%, you already have a situation where people are struggling to pay. How is this 20.5% supposed to assist the situation?
Again, Sakina, nobody likes to pay more for any product, and particularly in such a distressed economic situation. The reality, however, is that Eskom has to pay its suppliers for the coal that it gets. It has to pay its suppliers to maintain the power stations. It indeed has to also pay its workers to do the work. It also has to pay for the debts that it has incurred to build these power stations. And that is money that has to be paid for by the consumer. The reality now is that Eskom continues courtesy of the government financial support. So you have to get the tariff or the electricity price to a level where Eskom can actually be self-sustainable without needing to come to the government or to the taxpayer for support. In this instance, therefore, it is the customer that has to pay. The hearings with the regulator, NERSA, ended last week on Friday, where members of the public and indeed business and the citizens had an opportunity to object or indeed to support Eskom's application for a 24.5% increase. The regulator will now consider this and during February and March make a decision as to how much the electricity increase will be.
So with regard to that, and I hear what you're saying about Eskom's expenses and the public having to pick up the tab for that. But what about the fruitless and wasteful expenditure? What about the corruption? Why should the public have to pick up that bill? Just in terms of recouping some of that money, how's Eskom faring?
We have previously, Sakina, discussed the many efforts that Eskom is making to collect monies that were illegally paid out or stolen from Eskom by both Eskom's own former employees and indeed some suppliers. We have recovered, as you do know by now, from McKinsey more than 1 billion rand. We have recovered from a company called ABB 1.5 billion rand. These are all monies that were paid out illegally. There are court cases ongoing with regards to PwC. There are court cases ongoing with regards to the Gupta companies and indeed with regards to former executives of Eskom who did play a part in fleecing the public through these contracts. So these, as you do know, unfortunately, court cases take a very long time, particularly in civil matters. We have previously also discussed many criminal cases that Eskom has laid over the years with the police. We have only seen arrests in one case where 4 people are going through the criminal trial. As you do know, of course, Eskom can only lay criminal charges and let the police and the state to run with those and supply all the evidence that is needed. This is something that Eskom has done. We do await indeed any action from the law enforcement agencies. And so far, I must admit that the outcomes have been rather disappointing. You have seen evidence that has been led by Eskom's own executives at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry with regards to those. The reality, though, is there is a dire need for financial restoration at Eskom, and there is a dire need to keep the lights on for the country. And that has to be paid for. That is why Eskom has to continue doing business. That is why Eskom has to continue getting in revenue and indeed making sure that we are able to supply electricity to the country.
Sikonathi, we'll have to leave it there. But thanks so much for your time this morning. Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha on matters involving Eskom and public concerns. Over to Leanne for more news.